The bureaucracy, however, that has grown up around it is really very complicated. So, for example, it will typically, even if you don't use a lawyer to go through the paperwork process, it will typically cost you around £250, £300 to go through the process, which immediately takes something that should be a really good service that helps the most vulnerable in the community into effectively a perk for the middle class. You know, particularly when you bear in mind that if you get the paperwork, it says you must read this explanatory booklet before you fill in the forms, and the explanatory booklet is 86 pages long. So 86 pages long, bill for a couple of £100, it becomes a process for the middle class. Now, so you ask the question, is the Office for the Public Guardian being well run? Why is it doing this? Why is it charging so much? Where is its money going on its expenses? Is it actually really a very expensive process and the blame lies with Parliament for how the legislation is drawn up, or does the blame lie with the Office of the Public Guardian and its Chief Executive? All those sorts of questions. Nominally, the Office for the Public Guardian is responsible to the Secretary of State in the Justice Department, you know, in terms of who is responsible for its business plan and so on. In practice, it clearly isn't sensible to expect the Secretary of State in that department to be responsible at detail level, like how many pages of instructions is one particular non-departmental body issuing. So actually, in many ways, it seems to me shifting that responsibility is a good thing, because actually if it's exposing and making more accountable what people lower down the chain are doing, then you're actually putting the accountability and the responsibility on the people who are actually doing the job. But obviously there's a trade-off there, because on the one hand, you know, it can be quite nice and comforting to think, well, I'm going to blame the minister and I'm going to blame that political party. But it can be a bit of a fake, you know, it can be a bit of a false reassurance that it gives you. And it seems to me, in many ways, I would far rather that the chief exec and the members of the advisory board, the Office of Public Guardian, that they were held accountable and we knew far more about what they did and the data behind their decision-making and so on, even if it does mean the Secretary of State for Justice gets to say, actually don't hold me accountable. In the end, that would be a better trade-off.
Yeah, I think that's a world where it's more difficult to identify who to blame doesn't sound much fun. Yeah, yeah. I think that, you know, Twitter thrives on blaming single people. So it doesn't sound good. Just we need to finish because we're going to run out of time for our final keynote. But just some thoughts, maybe just moving forward. We didn't quite have a Twitter election or a social media election. It's more TV election. I mean, I wonder, looking forward, what kind of influence we're going to get from the blogosphere and from social media gurus and the Twitterati as we go through this next potentially long term in government.
John Barnes wrote a good piece on this. John Barnes wrote a good piece on this a couple of days ago. The key point in which was that while this wasn't a non-internet election, the bit that was really missing from our election was strongly characteristic of the last American presidential election, was access. That what Obama did was gave people access to the online campaign and engage people like that and made people part of it. And we really, none of the parties in our election got to grips with that at all. What they effectively did was, it sometimes quite well and quite sophisticatedly, but they used the new media in a very old linear way to broadcast and didn't use it really to engage and to give people ownership. Give them access, you give them ownership. Give them ownership, they got a reason to vote for you. And that's where that's the next generation of political campaigning. But we didn't get there in this election, no.
Yes, I was going to say that there were good examples of political campaigning around, but I think that this election, it was so varied and so different in different seats, different parts of the country, that probably quite a lot of the good stuff hasn't been noticed. And if there's one thing that I want to see develop, it's for the sort of scrutiny that's applied at Westminster, where we have our they work for you, so we can look at what ministers said 14 years ago to do it now. And I want to see that happen at a local level. But the other half of that is that people who write, amateurs who are writing locally, local bloggers need to pick up the sort of skills to do, how to do effective freedom of information requests, how to interrogate their local councillors. And so I want to see sort of the skills that are sometimes used nationally developed more widely. But as for the election, I think that the politicos on Twitter, I think to a large extent we missed it, to be honest. I think that there was a lot of shouting at each other going on. And I think the one good example of the local campaigning that came up in the RSA debate was Stella Creasy in Walthamstow, and you could say the same for Grant Shapps on the Conservative side, that they just got on with getting in touch with their local constituents and using what is fairly old technology, email, to make real contacts. And I think that if we focus just on the technology, then we'll make exactly the same mistake that's been made before and before and before.
Okay. A quick one from you, Stuart, because you've got the floor next. So.
I think the interesting play in the next election when it comes to social media won't necessarily be about getting the message out. It's that the power of social media is that it's a great search engine for finding people, for identifying where they are and identifying what they're interested in. And if you're trying to target a specific message at 100 voters in a swing seat, then that's a very, very powerful tool. It's a bit sinister, but it's very, very powerful.
Mark?
I mean, one of the things social media does more generally is it makes it easier for like-minded people to find other like-minded people, even if they're not in the same geographic area, which in the election meant that, okay, people interested in politics who wanted to talk about politics could find other such people in a way that perhaps didn't have that much of an impact beyond sort of emphasising existing echo chambers at a national level. But what it meant was partly, I think, the significance at the local level that Matt touched on, but also the potential for any political party which hits internal controversy over the next few years, for the people at the grassroots who are at odds with the party leadership to use social media to organise and to push forward their positions in a way that previously would have been much, much harder. Whether it's the Labour leadership election that does that, whether it's the Liberal Democrat all-member postal ballot for party president later this year, whether it's internal fighting in the Conservatives, you know, who knows which it will be, but I think that's where there's huge scope for actually giving grassroots members in parties more power over what's happening in those parties.
Great. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We've got still time to hear Stuart. Thanks to Matt, Stuart, Mark, and Sean.